Good morning. Unfortunately from my home and not from the estuary. The weather recently has been absolutely atrocious for fishing. Rain, which is fine, you can put up with that. Wind, you can't go out in that. So this short video is just about the weather. Why we've got the conditions we've got, why they're appalling for fishing. So there's your cue to switch off if you're not interested in the weather. If you want some fishing, hopefully there'll be some next time. But looking at the forecast, haven't been out for weeks. I did attempt to go out last week. I got as far as my kitchen door, opened the door, closed the door and went back to bed again. This weekend it's appalling. The tidal window is 40 to 50 knots of wind associated with that, so I ain't going out in that. Next weekend is not looking great either. It's the tides mean it's a two-tide day unless we go out in the dark, and the weather's just not going to be good enough to support that. So yeah, this one is all about the weather. Why have we got it, and why is it persisting? So to start with, it's all about stability, or a lot to do with stability. Now, I could go technical and talk about adiabatic lapse rates, etc., but what it boils down to is if you get a parcel of air at the surface and warm it warmer than its surroundings, it's going to rise. If it's still warmer than its surroundings, it's going to continue to rise. If it continues to rise, it eventually reach its dew point, and then you'll form cloud and rain. Conversely, if you move warm air over a colder surface, it becomes stable. It doesn't want to rise, it wants to stick to the surface. It's not going to bubble up, and we're not going to get weather. And in meteorological terms, weather is something falling out of the sky. So stable air largely gives you no weather. Unstable air gives you lots of weather, potentially. So, with that in mind, what we have, diagram time. So if we've got half of the world, let's get this about right if I can. If we've got half of the world with the pole at the top and the equator, what we end up with at the top in the Arctic is a massive lot of high pressure because of the cold dense air, and a massive low pressure at the equator because of the warm rarefied air. So high pressure to low pressure, fairly obvious that the air is going to move all the way down to the equator. And because we don't want all the air at the equator, that's then going to return at high level to the pole. It can't do that for various reasons. The air won't stick to the surface all the way from the poles to the equator. It's going to delaminate at some point. And we've also got another effect going on, which I'll come to in a while, Coriolis, because of the effect of the Earth spinning. But if we just look at pressure for now, it can't do that in one big loop, so it does it in three. So we've got one at the pole, and we've got one down by the equator. And then this air is obviously rising, this air is sinking. So the bit in the middle to balance it up goes the other way around. With air sinking and air rising. This forms three cells. They've got names. That's the polar cell, the Ferrel cell, and the Hadley cell. And what that gives us with this air all rising here is an area of low pressure, and with the air all sinking here, it gives us an area of high pressure. So that's the three cells split up. And if we look at the low and high pressure regions, so we've got a low pressure region and a high pressure region. Now we have to look at that little thing called Coriolis. Geostrophic wind force is what the Met people call it. And it's just basically a consequence of the Earth spinning. So the Earth turns this way around, and at the equator, if we keep the sum simple, 24,000 miles around, going once a day, the air here is going round at 1,000 miles an hour, and at the poles it's just turning on its axis. So if we look at air that wants to move from the high pressure to the low pressure area, so we've got low pressure here, high pressure here. If, say, this is moving at, let's say, 100 miles an hour, and up here this is just moving at 50 miles an hour, if you move this pocket of air from there to there, it's going to be moving 50 miles an hour faster than the air that's surrounding it. So it's going to move in this direction. And if you combine the pressure gradient force, the urge of the air to move from high to low pressure, with Coriolis, the geostrophic wind force, we end up with the air moving along the isobars rather than across the isobars. And that's why in the northern hemisphere the air flows clockwise around a high and anti-clockwise around a low. Now, before I take this awful diagram away, we've got one other thing to consider. We've got all of this warm air coming up here and all of the cold air coming up here. So in between the polar and the ferrule cell, at high level, we've got a lot of warm air here, we've got a lot of cold air here. That gives us a pressure difference at height. Nature doesn't like a pressure difference, so it fills that gap with air movement. We call that wind. This is a particularly powerful wind, and we call that the jet stream. So the jet stream up here, that waves around the northern part of the globe, dragging the low and high pressure systems along with it, and that, along with Coriolis, dictates where the high and low pressures are going to be, what direction the wind is going to be flowing, and then what direction the wind flows determines our weather in the UK. I'll get rid of this mess and show you what's next. Okay, for those of you that are still with me and not completely weathered out, so we've got the jet stream which drags along our area. There are several jet streams around the globe, but we just call it the jet stream, it's the one that affects us. The jet stream dragging the high and low pressure wherever it chooses to take it, and that determines which air mass affects us, where the wind is coming from. So if we have a look at dodgy diagram time again, the good old UK, starting up in this direction, we can have wind from the northeast, that we call polar continental, and we have to look at stability again here. So it comes from Siberia, very cold, low moisture content, very stable, and then as it warms up it becomes gradually more unstable. It depends on its track. If it comes largely over Europe, it remains very dry, so there's not much weather to come with it, and this gives us our lovely crisp, clear winter days. If it has more of a sea track across the North Sea, then it can pick up an awful lot of moisture as it comes from its very cold origins, and that gives us the beast from the east. Can be yeah, really poor conditions. Moving round, we've got wind from the southeast, tropical continental. This is very unstable in its origins, gradually getting more stable as it comes towards the UK. This is the weather that gives us our hot, prolonged periods. You'll all be aware that if we do get long sunny spells as we had in this summer, we've generally got east wind, southeast wind. It can also come up from Africa and give us quite a lot of pollution in the air. So hot, balmy days, warm nights, but also it can hold a fair bit of pollution, and particularly we get like the Sahara dust that you'll have all seen on your cars. Further round from the southwest, we've got tropical maritime. This again, from its origins, very unstable, getting more stable as it comes to us, but it's got a massive water content. So as that water content, as the air gets pushed down, as it becomes cooler and more stable, that's when we get our stratiform cloud, which can be right down on the deck, and then that's known as fog as it comes towards our area and the cooler areas. That fog is the one that fishermen don't like. Advection fog is its real name. 10 o'clock fog, I've heard it called. 40-knot fog in Cornwall, they call it. And with similar conditions, but coming from the east, sea fret or the har, it's the one that doesn't clear. Radiation fog is the lovely ribbons that stay in the valleys just as the evenings cool down. That clears away when the sun comes up. Because this is an air mass bringing the fog, that one's advection fog, and that doesn't clear for potentially days at a time. So it can give us fog. That also gives us our stratiform cloud, and if we push that up in the water content levels, it can become rain bearing. So that gets the nimbus title as well, nimbus stratus, and we get solid rain from that direction. Coming further round from the northwest, this is our polar maritime air. So this coming up from the Greenland direction, very cold, very stable at its origin, gradually warming up and high water content and picking up even more water as it comes south over the relatively warmer seas. That bubbles up, and that gives us our bubbly clouds, the cumuliform clouds, and if that becomes rain bearing, cumulonimbus, and then that gives us our showery weather. So rain from the southwest, showers from the northwest, potentially thunderstorms, flash floods, and all the horribleness that goes with that. So what weather have we got at the moment? Well, there are a couple of other air masses that affect us. Arctic maritime. The north wind shall blow and we shall have snow. Enough said about that one. And then you've got this little cheeky fella here, the returning polar maritime. That's the one that affects us predominantly. It's the one that gives the Met Office a headache because it's a mixture of polar maritime and tropical maritime. Very stable to start with, becoming increasingly unstable. It picks up a lot of moisture, and it depends how far it dips into the warm air before returning and coming back to the UK. So it can be chilly and showery, and it can be muggy, windy and wet. And we get a complete mixture from returning polar maritime. Just a few degrees here and there with the wind direction completely changes the weather. Just a few 100 miles, not a lot in Met terms, further south before it returns or further north before it goes to the UK. And that gives us our grotty weather. So that's what we have weather-wise. The predominant weather in the UK comes from the southwest, and it's a fight between polar maritime, returning polar maritime and tropical maritime. The joins between these air masses are called fronts, and when it comes in from the southwest, it's largely these two that give us the waving cold and warm fronts that come up from the southwest, giving us all the weather, giving us all the wind, keeping the boats on the pontoon and stopping us from fishing. I hope that's not too weather geeky for you. Hope you found it interesting. Promise not to be too geeky next time. I just don't know when that next time is going to be. We'll wait for the air mass to be more favourable and we'll get out fishing. Thanks for watching.